Hey there, guys. This little lesson today, this little video is going to be talking you through the week 6 in-class kind of project dealing with what's called fluid dynamics inside of Maya, and how it's another simulation with a lot of things that are built in like gravity and so on, and how it's similar to particles, but rather than the whole world inside of Maya being dynamic, fluid containers basically, best way to describe it, almost creates almost like an aquarium, a fish tank kind of container that holds the dynamics in there. And I'll go through some elements here about working with containers, emitters. There's even an option here where you can make oceans or ponds with ripples. And again, using the dynamic relationship editor to actually put things within this container. And it's called in-class project 5 explosion, but really it's just, I want you guys to kind of play around, follow some tutorials that exist out there in the wonderful world of YouTube and Autodesk that kind of walk you through ways to create fluid container elements. There's obviously some tutorial links I've provided you here, just showing you some of the advancements of what you can do with dynamics. And all I want you to do is just have some fun, follow a tutorial, in experimenting with fluid dynamics. So let me go ahead and jump over here to Maya. And remember, just as we've talked before, when it comes to doing these little in-class, make sure you always go project window, new, you can call it fluid project, okay? And make sure you choose a proper folder to then place your project. So here, let's see here, we go find the proper folder to place it here, and fluid dynamics, and I'll just hit select and accept. And that, of course, sets the project. Once again, too, because we're dealing with dynamics and simulation, make sure you hit the little running man in the far right corner. And even though we're at 24 frames per second, which is acceptable, make sure you change the playback speed to every frame. It's really important because the simulations can get very heavy. And we'll hit save. Now, fluid dynamics are actually, again, also located here in the FX section. And if I come to the fluids here, you can see how they basically work. Is you can make a 3D fluid container, you can make a 2D fluid container, you can add emitters within that state or emit from an object. Here's an example here of ponds and oceans. You could even add neat little things here, like if you make a fluid or a pond or an ocean, you can add a dynamic boat, or think of like a buoy or something that create a wake. I'll get to these in a little bit here, but one of the best ways to understand these fluid dynamics is go to this here called Get Example and click on Fluid. And what this does is this opens up the content browser, okay? And by the way, guys, you can see there's lots of here. There's effects and assets that are thrown in here. So these are different particle effects that are pre-made. You've got examples of hair. You've got some examples here of Bifrost fluids. But for now, we're just going to go to the fluid examples. And you can see here in these fluids, they have some pre-made fluid containers that are already built. Great one here, for example, you got clouds and skies. So you can think about what this is doing is literally building a giant container that can represent the appearance of clouds or sun, sunsets, storms, even fog. Okay, and you just simply would right-click and import these. You also notice here are some explosions, nuclear explosion, fireballs, and great way to understand how this basically works is I'll go with just the blast here, and to import it, we right-click and import. And that pulls it into the scene, and you see now what we basically get. It actually even gives us a camera that we can work with, but the best way to see this in action here, working with these fluids, is we hit the play button, and you see this fluid is changing over time. It's actually growing by creating particles that give the illusion of smoking cloud, or like I said, it's a fireball. And probably the best way to actually see this in action is to turn on the texture element. See, and it's using a texture map here to actually break this ball of cloud or explosion here. And if I just hit play, you're going to see it's going to give me a big flashbang here. And let's just hit the render button just to see what that looks like for a second. And you see it actually is an explosion fireball with things like glow and incandescence that actually makes this up. It's pretty cool. You can even see it change in its color and its textures and its different parameters here. And if we go into the attribute editor, this is pre-built, so again, it's just a sample of what you can do with fluids. And then, of course, you can use this. In fact, if you've ever seen South Park, a lot of the explosions and fire and so on that they use in South Park are actually made out of these default, importable, pre-made fluid containers. So let's go ahead and back up here. And I'm just going to hit delete and go and open up our different fluids here. Because you can see here, there's even one. If I right-click and import this in, this is an actual nuclear cloud effect. Let me hit rewind and play. And you can see how they're animating the fluid container in its size. You see how slow its playback is because these are very, very heavy to work with. And you see it's actually an emission of clouds with glow and everything else, and it's actually going to build inside the container the simulation of a nuclear explosion. So in a nutshell, this is what you get when you get a 3D fluid container. I'm just going to hit pause, select everything. You see the performance does start to deteriorate, like I said. Now, there's also in this world 2D containers, and this is an example of a nuclear explosion within a two-dimensional container. So you see now what it basically acts as is it's going to simulate the same thing as that 3D, but exist here inside of a 2D container, and that's pretty cool. So again, if you just set this up in the distance, and you could place it within, I don't know, like a desert scene or an ocean scene, you just place this so that's aiming towards the camera, and you get the result that you're kind of looking for here. Go ahead and just go new scene. Now, in addition there, you can see there's great examples here of fire, now, which is interesting because we did do the candle flame, and these are much more realistic fluids because fire actually behaves like a fluid. So even though you hear fluid examples, you think of liquids or water, and we'll get to those as well. You can see I right-click and I can import this turbulent flame in here, and you see what's actually emitting the flame. Let me turn off my grid. Is this little torus, okay? And the flames come up. And you can see if I were to render this, just how real this fire looks. See that? It actually looks like a fire. And if I were to delete that, notice now there is no object on fire, but that could be easily replaced by putting one in here, and of course going to our fluids and say, hey, emit, where's that, 3D container, emit from object, and we can actually get this object then to emit from. So I hold shift, and now you see the sphere is actually giving off an emission inside that container. Now again, this is not going to look like fire right now because I just told it to emit, but it does look pretty good. It's just, we got to go into the, you can go into the attribute editor right here, and you can see all these different attributes for our fluid container. Now, we don't have a lot of time here to get into the every bit and piece of this. That's why if you're going to submit a fluid project assignment for this assignment 6, then you're welcome to go follow a tutorial that'll walk you through the process. But it's not really that tough. It's just, like I say, the results you get are pretty cool. Okay, you can see we've got more here. Initial states, burning paper. You know, there's a whirly particle that we can have here. There are liquid examples in here. So again, it's like a splash tank or a fish tank is what the effect they're kind of doing with these liquids. There's some miscellaneous down here. Like I said, just something simple here, like I've used this for clients before. And what I just created here, or imported in, is called a wind tunnel. So you see, it emits particles on a 2D container, and our object here is simply what is doing the wind tunnel effect. So you see it hits there and it goes around that sphere. But you could put any object you want in here. You could put a car, you could put, you know, an airplane or something, and you see we get the wind tunnel effect. You can even keyframe this object to have it be, you know, changing in size or scale or moving up and down, and you get that neat effect of just a wind tunnel. And you see it's going past it and you're getting that wind effect. So lots of cool options here. Here's some, look at that, you can get some smoke, puffballs of smoke, like a missile exploding or something like that, or a cigarette butt that, you know, burning. There's some cool space nebula ones here, which are pretty remarkable, but again, they're very large because fluids are large. And you see now, go ahead and turn that on, what this, so you see the camera is actually looking at this nebula. So if I were to just change my panel perspective and go to the nebula camera, I'm now looking through that nebula camera that came, and it's simply just keyframing and moving through this kind of cool little space nebula, like something out of, I don't know, Guardians of the Galaxy or something. And when you render it off, you're going to notice it's going to slow down considerably because it's quite heavy in the render. So you can almost get an idea here that the Play Blast would not really work well with the fluid containers. It would actually be more of a render sequence that you're going to want to do to see this fluid container. And again, you can see it's taking a very long time because it's a very large scene. Let me just hit escape. See, it was able, oh, there we go. And you can see how the voxels are revealing exactly. It's got space and stars and this kind of cloud nebula kind of effect. And there's also some other ones here, like there's a terrain, height field, all kinds of neat little fluid container elements here. We've also got some oceans, like I said. This is kind of funny here. If we just go to a boat wake, import this one to get an idea of what it does. And let's go ahead and use, well, I don't have to use that camera. Let's just zoom in a little. And this little thing is representing a boat wake. So you can actually make a boat, put it on the water, right? Because right now you see I've got this kind of just playing through with this animated boat wake, which of course you would parent, you could parent that to the back of an actual 3D boat. You could actually, you know, then have it move through the water. You could create a creature, you know, kind of landing on the water, flying through the water. Likewise here, if I were to come here, and I'm just going to make a simple cylinder, place it there, hold shift, select the fluid container, and come up to our fluids. See? And I can actually make this be, well, I can make it a boat. See? And let's see if that object actually floats like a boat now. See? So you get that illusion of this, you know, kind of bobbing up and down or moving with the water. See, I can float this object, and now as the wake hits it, you see how it actually animates quite naturally as a bobber, as a buoy. And this thing is actually an emitter that's going through this, that's doing all the deformers. Let's actually take this cylinder and put it closer into the water. And you see, of course, it bobs up and down because it is actually working within the fluid container. Let's go see what else we have here in these basic fluids. Oh yeah, you've got you know, high seas, giant storm. Talk about cool. I mean, this stuff is really, really neat. So let me import this giant storm. And you see what it is. It's just a small example of what it looks like, and you can go in and you can look at all the things that are making this water work. In fact, let's go ahead and just toss in another little bobber on the water and float selected object. And you see now if I hit rewind and play, it's floating on the water surface. And even though this is just a small example of what this ocean is, you even see there's mist on there. So it's more than just one container. It's a mist container, it's a fog container, it's ocean container. But even though it kind of ends here, what's cool here, let's see if this actually works, is by rendering it, it actually tiles and fills that whole area. And you can see that's pretty, again, I have it on a low, but you can see how that ocean, and this is the ocean that, it's called Scanline Ocean, guys. This is what they used in a lot of major films like 300. I'm trying to think of that Mark Wahlberg fishing movie where it's really where they proved what this is actually capable of doing here. And let me hit the render button again there. And you can see just how impressive this ocean water, even with, it's got foam, so you can create foam at the peaks. And you see just how incredible that water looks. So again, fluid dynamics, there's a lot you can do with this stuff. You can start by going in here and finding some samples to play around with, whether it's skies or explosions. I just want you guys to kind of play with the fluid dynamics. And if you don't get in here into the contact browser, remember, that was simply going to fluids and saying, hey, get an example. But you could also here, you know, make an ocean, make a pond, make a 2D or 3D container, you know, add surface, boats, all this kind of stuff. So again, instead of just having primitive geometry in your scene, like maybe you want to play around with fluid dynamic fire, well, make something that's on fire, not just a cone, not just a torus. So maybe you have a simple geometry or something like, you know, want to do, and you could do that. Please look at the examples, of course, that I actually also made available here, and some samples about what people do with this fluid dynamics. And good luck, have some fun, and I look forward to seeing what you guys can do with all your fluid dynamic samples. Thank you. See you guys later.